Everyone, and welcome to the Superhero Chronicles. And we have reached the end of the Spider-Man retro review, as we will tackle the final release of a Spider-Man movie before his impending introduction to the MCU. As we take a look at the Amazing Spider-Man 2, the sequel to the first movie, obviously. Marc Webb returns and the cast returns with some new additions, being Paul Giamatti and Jamie Foxx. Now, for this movie, I'm going to take a more of a pros and cons approach because there's a lot of things I do like and a lot of things I don't like. So let's waste no time. Let's get right on them. The pros. Pro number one. The relationship between Peter and Gwen is expanded upon much, much more. And there's some more elements added onto it. Of course, Peter feeling the guilt of seeing Captain Stacy's dying, and him making a promise to never allow Gwen to be a part of his life. And you see Peter is going against that, and Gwen's in his life, but he's having conflicting thoughts with it. He keeps everywhere he goes, he sees Captain Stacy's an apparition of Captain Stacy, as a constant reminder of what Peter is doing, having Gwen be a part of his life. And you see Peter juggling with that, while at the same time still wanting to be with Gwen, but at the same time he can't be with Gwen because he can't take the risk. And on the flip side, you got Gwen, who wants to be with Peter, and is at the point where she just doesn't want any more part of it at the same time, because through dialogue exchanges we find out that this is not the first time this has been happening. This has happened on multiple occasions, and it's wearing her out, and she's at the point where she's just done. So that stuff is really good, and the way they progress that throughout the film to where they eventually just say, "Fuck it all, fuck the rules, fuck it all, let's be together finally," and that, of course, eventually leads to the tragic ending, which we'll get to. Pro 2. Harry and Peter's relationship. Now, it's not as good as it was in the trilogy. Well, it's not as good as it was in the trilogy, but I do like it. To me, Dane DeHaan, who plays Harry Osborn, and Andrew Garfield as Peter, they were starting to develop a good chemistry with each other, and I was starting to believe that they were friends. There's this one scene where they're together, and they're just chatting the way people would, and they're just chatting the way people who have been friends for a long time would chat. And you can feel that they had a genuine bond, and there's a natural chemistry between those two. And that shows, of course, they have more scenes also that further develop that. And you see that they have a strong, and you also see how that friendship deteriorates, because we find out that Harry gets an inheritance from Norman Osborn. Chris Cooper, played in this movie, who dies, and it has one scene, and on that, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in the cons, hold on. Anyway, yeah, Harry has a disease that he inherited, and in his mind, in order for him to get rid of it, he needs Spider-Man's blood. But Spider-Man will not give him the blood, mainly because he doesn't know if it's going to kill him or if it's going to help him. He can't take that risk, and that strain is what that is what deteriorates the friendship between Peter and Harry, and eventually turns Harry into the Goblin. So the way that friendship started off as the high and then deteriorated, I thought was well done. What else? The action sequences. The action sequences in this movie are cool. They're fun to look at. Like, the color palette is much more vibrant as opposed to how muted it was in the first movie. The color palette in this one is more vibrant. It's more colorful. Spider-Man's costume looks more like his comic book counterpart, and it looks great. The special effects look magnificent as usual. The fight scenes that he has with Electro at the end of the movie at the power grid is awesome. I like that a lot. The opening scene where he's chasing down Alexei Strivich, played by Paul Giamatti, is also a fun little is a over the top fun scene, and Paul Giamatti is just hamming it up, having a good time. You can tell he's into it, and it really is. And Paul Giamatti's like charisma radiates off the screen, and you're into it too, because like, if the guys, he's into it, I'm getting into it. It's over the top, it's fun, it's campy. So that stuff is good. And of course, the first scene where we see Electro and Spider-Man fight there in Times Square. That's also a pretty cool effects driven scene with some cool slow mo shots. So the directing and action sequences this time around by Marc Webb is much more polished to me, and it looks great. All right, on to the cons. Paul Giamatti is wasted in this movie. He's totally, completely wasted. I was going to this movie expecting to see the Rhino, and I got to see him for 5 minutes, for like 2 minutes at the end. I'm like, that's disappointing because that you got Paul Giamatti. And this guy's like a big guy, big time actor guy, and like I thought he was going to be in it throughout like maybe not throughout the course of the movie, but like you see him in the beginning, and then maybe in the end he'll come back in the end with the Rhino suit. But there was some, some plot convenience. I don't care. I just wanted to see more, but I didn't get that. And I got to see he had at the end he had the mechanical Rhino suit and it looks cool. And he has that, and he and Spider-Man before they can even fight, the movie just ends. So it's like big con, another con, Electro. I'm not a fan of Jamie Foxx, though. In this movie, his performance has grown on me. I still don't care for Electro as a character. I don't find him the least bit interesting. Like in this movie, this version of Electro is pretty much the Jim Carrey Riddler from Batman Forever. An obsessed man, reclusive in a way, geeky, nerdy, has no friends, has like this weird shrine to Spider-Man in his house. It's like they literally went to Batman Forever and say, use this for Electro. And it's like, whatever. I mean, his fight scenes are cool. But his look is too much like Dr. Manhattan. I'm like, Jesus. He's pretty much an electrified version of Dr. Manhattan, and I just don't like it at all. He's too blue. Honestly, it looked more silly than the way it looks in the books. At least in the books, he looks different. I mean, like, if you're going to use Electro, at least instead of making him blue, have him be like an amalgamation of his color palette, which is like green and yellow, instead of making him all blue, because it looked like Dr. Manhattan, and it was annoying me. And performance-wise, Jamie Foxx was hit and miss. In some scenes he was okay. Other scenes they're just like, can we just move on to the next scene, please? I'll never be a Jamie Foxx fan. The only movie I liked him in was Django Unchained. Other than that, the man is nothing to me. Con number 3. Oscorp. Oscorp. Not Oscorp. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn. Spider-Man's probably greatest enemy. Played by a good actor in Chris Cooper. He's in the movie for 3 minutes and he dies off screen. He dies off screen. He leaves no impact whatsoever. It really got on my nerves because I was expecting to see more of Norman Osborn. Look, I wasn't expecting him to go into the suit, which I thought would have been cool to see, but it was just like, blah. I need more Norman. Give me more Norman. Ugh, so that's a con. And now I'm going to get to I'm going to tell you things that are both pros and cons, both at the same time. Both pro and con at the same time is the Green Goblin himself. Now, pro. Cool seeing Harry Osborn become the Green Goblin in this movie. Con, it wasn't really necessary for him to be the Green Goblin in this movie. Like, this movie, Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 pretty much did what Spider-Man 3 did. It was trying to cram so much shit into this thing, and it became a juggling act, and it was annoying because, like, all right, so you're forcing the Goblin origin over here. You have an Electro thing over here. Then you still got to work with, and you still have that Peter discovering his, learning about his father storyline over here. You got the Peter and Gwen relationship over here, and you got the Peter and Harry relationship over here. Like, you got so many friggin' subplots going on, and it's hard to keep track. It's hard to keep track of everything. It's literally that Spider-Man 3 syndrome, and I'm sorry, that brings the movie down. It bogs the movie down because it's just too much story being crammed into one movie. You're not giving nothing. You're not giving anything a chance to breathe. There's no breathing in between. There's no breathing because like jumps to one, jumps to another, jumps to one, jumps to another. It keeps repeating. It's that same cycle, and that gets exhausting after a while. Watching this movie because it's so hard trying to juggle all these storylines. Of course, and another pro and con. We find out the pro. Peter finds out that his father did not abandon him on purpose. He abandoned him because Norman Osborn was out to get his research, and pretty much Richard and his wife had to disappear in order to protect Peter and to hide from Norman. Okay, the con. There's not really a real payoff unless you watch the deleted scene where Peter actually meets his father and they two have a conversation. But I can't talk about that because it's not in the movie. It's a deleted scene, which makes it non-canonical. You should have kept that in there because that happens right immediately after the tragic event, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. See, Peter meeting his father would have been perfect. All right. Now, with all that being said, let's get to the ending. So, the Green Goblin. So after Peter defeats Electro, the Green Goblin, comes in. Harry Osborn's Green Goblin coming, and kidnaps Gwen. They go into this clock tower, and essentially it is the death of Gwen Stacy. She falls to her death and she dies. And I loved it. I expected it to happen. I wanted it to happen. I love the acting when Peter realizes Gwen is dead. It's genuine. It's heart-wrenching. It's just, it'll make you well up because, he's pretty much holding the love of his life in his hand and she's dead. And he blames himself for it because he could not save her. And the preceding scenes that follow when you see like his torment, torturing him, was also great. And that is when, and of course that is where the father, where the Peter meets his dad scene should have been, and that should have been in the actual theatrical release, because it would have made the death of Gwen Stacy mean much more by having Peter meet his dad finally, and having his dad come back into his life and give him that encouragement to fight back again. Because I think the whole thing of Peter watching Gwen's graduating speech was kind of like, really? That's how Peter gets inspired again, because he hears a speech. I think it would have worked much better if they kept the dad thing. So that's both a pro and both a con at the same time. Because this movie had the right idea, but the execution was way off. And you can tell, like in Spider-Man 3, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many plot points being established, and you're also establishing the Sinister Six by having the Man in Black, who at the end of the movie, sees Harry in prison in the institution, and then we see the Easter eggs. We see the Dr. Octopus Sonic Claws. We see the Vulture cost. We see the Vulture wings. And, we're setting up Sinister Six for Spider-Man. We're setting up Sinister Six, which ended up not happening. Because shortly after this movie was released, they immediately said, no, they didn't immediately say fuck it, but it felt like they immediately said fuck it, because before you know it, Sony pretty much had the licensing agreement with Marvel, with Disney, to have Spider-Man appear in the MCU. So, as it stands, The Amazing Spider-Man is an incomplete trilogy. It's an incomplete story to me. And as much as I like both movies, they are, looking back at it now, and actually, they are inferior to the original Sam Raimi trilogy. I'm sorry. I think acting-wise, they're better made, and they're better acted, but at least Sam Raimi has a complete trilogy, and his story his story was told, whether it was good or bad. It was still told, and it was still completed. The Amazing Spider-Man That story is not completed. There was more. There's more. There's one more story to tell, and it was never and it will never be told. So like here's the deal. Amazing Spider-Man 2 overall as a movie, I'm going to give it a solid 7. It's still very enjoyable. It's still fun to watch. The action sequences are cool. You know, most of the performances are solid, with some hit and misses from some cast members, as I covered. But the fact is, it's a cluttered story. You have characters that are just introduced and then forgotten about until like 2 seconds, to like the last 2 minutes of the movie. You have too many subplots that are just hard. They're just juggling around. They're having a hard time trying to juggle around and trying to fit into the story, which makes the story go in a million different ways. So, 7 out of 10 as a whole for the Amazing Spider-Man. Now, with the two movies combined, I have to give the Amazing Spider-Man from the first movie to the second movie a 5 out of 10 in terms of a 3-act story, because without that third movie, the Amazing Spider-Man will stand as an incomplete story, and I can't give it any higher than a 5 because your story was not finished and you chose not to finish it. So why should I give you a high grade? Well, anyway, those are my thoughts on the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you again next time.